Good afternoon. Hope that everyone is well. We're delighted to join you, to have you join us and to be with you to talk about Management 101 for Mentees. I am Ann Collins Smith, and I'm the Curator of Collections at the Spelman College Museum of Fine Art. And with me, we have Toby Bruce. Toby Bruce is the Director of Exhibitions and Collections and the Senior Curator of the Art Gallery of Hamilton. Wow, Toby. And we also have Emilia Layden, who is the Curator of Collections and Exhibitions at the Haggerty Museum of Art at Marquette University in Milwaukee. Like myself, Emilia is a graduate and alumna of the Mentee program, so I'd like to open with Emilia talking about your experience and how it helped you get to your next point in your career and your next position.
Sure. Thanks, Anne.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very positive experience in the mentorship program, partially because my mentor, Susan Earle from the Spencer Art Museum, sorry, blank there, in Lawrence, Kansas, had such tremendous experience, both as a curator with such an established track record, but also as a mentor to students and other colleagues. And so it was an interesting experience because partway through, we entered with a set of goals, and partway through it became apparent that I was going to have the chance to be promoted. I started as the associate curator, now curator of collections and exhibitions. It wasn't a straight promotion in the sense that I didn't leave the associate curator position. It was really a reformulation of my my current role, and it was really invaluable to speak with Susan throughout that process. Because our director was very open to my feedback. She had recently arrived at the museum. She started last August, and so it was really kind of at the midpoint of my mentorship year that this opportunity presented itself, and with Susan's help, I was really able to kind of have a voice in determining what the role would look like based on my experience, understanding the needs of the institution, and my prior experience. So it was very positive and great to have that opportunity to play a role in articulating what the position would be.
Awesome, awesome. I neglected to mention at the beginning that this webinar is being recorded, and in about a week or so's time you can find it on the resources section of the AAMC's website. So, Toby, can you tell us a little bit about your mentorship experiences and how it helped to get you to the next level?
Absolutely. No one gets anywhere without good mentors, really. And I think I started my career as a docent and then worked in the education department at another institution. And then contracts became available that I was fortunate enough to be given an opportunity. And it was a series of contracts, but I felt that, which I think is often the case with people entering into the field. We all start with contracts, and some of us have contracts through much of our professional life. But I didn't necessarily see that as a negative. I had the opportunity to work with a couple of different people who had very different perspectives on things, and it really diversified my experience. And then when I finished, this was at an art gallery at Queen's University in Kingston. And when those contracts ended, I moved to Toronto and was fortunate enough to be hired on as the collections manager in Hamilton. And I've been here now over 20 years and have, it's a long time, but I've also been at the right place at the right time. So there have been opportunities that I've been able to sort of maximize here at the gallery, but in every instance, in every stage along the way, there was someone with whom I was able to develop a really important relationship with, who felt that there was something in me that they were willing to invest in. And I think now that I'm in a position where I've moved from, I'm now into a management position, it becomes really, really important that we in turn create those opportunities for those just like me who are coming along just out of undergrad opportunities. And we have a university here in McMaster University in Hamilton, and I've just begun teaching there. And we often work with students wherever we can coming out of undergrad, because we know how difficult it is. You're just finished your art history or your studio program or your cultural studies program, and you have a theoretical base, and you're just, you're looking for anything to be able to get some practical experience.
Cool. So you've just rose through the ranks. How has your communication style helped you to maximize those opportunities?
Oh, that's a good question. I think in a word, you always have to show respect. You have to learn to communicate with everyone on staff, be it someone who is a colleague or a superior, but open communication and being acutely, or trying to be as aware as possible of other people's issues and concerns. One of the things that's actually a real gift in terms of having moved through the organization here in Hamilton is because I've been here so long, and people come and go. So we've seen, there's a core of us who have been here for a long time, but I think one of the main points is to be open, to always listen to what everyone has to say. You have to process everyone's information sort of differently, but to be flexible. That's one of the key things. If you stay somewhere, you have to be flexible. I've had the privilege of working with this is the fourth director now, all of whom are very, very different in style, have different priorities. They all want to advance the institution, somewhat, and in different ways. And so it's incredibly important to remain flexible. But in terms of communication, and sorry to get back to your question, I think it's always listening. And trying to have reasoned conversations where there is conflict or where there is frustration, because change also causes a lot of frustration and people feel vulnerable. And sometimes there have to be difficult conversations, but just to work at communication as honestly as possible.
So
I was just going to hop in. I completely agree, Toby. And I think one of the other keys is understanding how to communicate, that communication isn't just email. This, speaks to your point about understanding different styles and ways of working. I've had other colleagues go so far as to do the sort of HR assessment tools where they evaluate different personality types and working styles, so that they could really understand how to make everybody feel comfortable and, help people understand when it makes sense to email, when it makes sense to have an in-person meeting, when it makes sense to call, and it can be all of those things at different times, and to really kind of take a step back, have that flexibility to work with different styles, and understand how you may have to change your communication style at different points. And what may seem like adequate communication to you may not to somebody else. So just being open to that and understanding.
Yeah, and
I think also learning what doesn't work well, and kind of using those as lessons to move forward. And I think that some of it is a certain degree of self-awareness in terms of how you communicate, and understanding how that may or may not be received by somebody else. I came to the curatorial field in a somewhat circuitous way, and I think that has given me a lot of advantages in being able to understand different frames of reference, and that people are bringing different things to the conversation. And so you're not always in this kind of echo chamber of the curatorial world. It's helped me work with colleagues in other departments, the Curator of Education, the Preparators, the development directors, and so just bringing that kind of willingness to work together, and the authenticity from the beginning has been a real has really helped me along the way.
So Emilia, you've also been around, well, the closest to managing change with the new director at Spelman. So at the museum where I am, it's four of us, the curator of education, collections, the director, and the museum program coordinator. We do have a new president, and the president of the college just happens to be a former museum director. And I've been at institutions like Wellesley when I've been between two directors, and it's been kind of interesting. And I've learned how to manage that kind of change well, and I think it's through the flexibility you were talking about, Toby. But Emilia, can you tell us how you've managed that change? Not only did you manage the change, you managed a new position that you got to reformulate. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I think that part of the reason I was successful in establishing a good working relationship with our incoming director is because we both shared a desire to have clear and correct and or clear and open, not correct, direct communication with one another. And you know, some of it is just reading people, right? So it was clear from the beginning that we shared a similar style in that way. I think that even though I wasn't technically in a leadership position, you know, maybe not a position of authority at the time, I had demonstrated leadership to my peers that had established a certain amount of credibility with them, and that really came with demonstrating really in everything that I was doing a commitment to the mission of the museum. And I think that that helped build trust, and that was apparent, you know, to the director and speaking, the incoming director and speaking with me, but also in speaking with my colleagues. So that was helpful. So I guess that would be a piece of advice to all of the mentees who are at various stages in their career, that you don't necessarily have to be in a, you know, quote unquote management position to demonstrate that leadership and those qualities. As you know, so part of it is that credibility. You know, and it's a give and take. So, you know, one example would be that when I arrived early on, I think it became clear to my colleagues that I wasn't necessarily advancing a personal curatorial agenda, that we were really all working together towards a common goal. And that spread a lot of goodwill and helped them, I think, understand that this was really a collaborative planning process. So people felt like they could contribute. And I think something else that I was able to do was really find common ground with colleagues from different departments. So we're a small organization. There's 9 of us. I'm more or less a curatorial department of 1. So I understand that this will be slightly different for those working in larger institutions with more hierarchy, but we're a relatively flat organization. And so it was important from the outset to take an interest in the work of other people in the organization and celebrate their accomplishments. So when I arrived, I found our curator of education, who is really key in everything that we do, was feeling like perhaps her work wasn't completely understood. So I really made an effort to attend some of the programs that she was working on. You know, I think she felt that that title indicated that it was, you know, your curator of education, it's K through 12 programming. And it was really much broader than that and more robust, particularly because we are an academic art museum and working with so many college level students at any given time. So I made it a point of attending some of her programs, attending her faculty workshops, attending classes that she conducted, so that I really was able to develop a deeper understanding of how she was working, and you know, then that led to our ability to work together in a productive way, so that we all felt like it was, again, that we were approaching things in a collaborative spirit, and that's part of, you know, the way that we were able to, you know, build those alliances, build those positive working relationships. So I think that that positioned me well to manage the change, and not just me, you know, all of my colleagues, because we felt like we were really working toward that common goal. I mean, you know, theoretically, you work on strategic planning processes together, and I've really tried to make our strategic plan a guide in how I do exhibitions and collections planning, because that's something that we established together. And so I think that helped manage the transition, and I think it also helped communicate to our incoming director that there was really that strong desire to work together, and that we had established these things in, I think, a transparent way. And that's been the key, I think, key to my work here, is kind of transparency in a process. We're really fortunate, and I've been really fortunate throughout my career, and that I've been supported by my superiors. And Toby, you mentioned this, the importance of mentorship, and you really, there's always been a tone at the top where I've been that has been to be, generous with your time, and to build goodwill, and to kind of bridge relationships with people working across the organization, and always reinforce that common goal that you're working toward. So that helped me personally advance, I think, and it also helped the institution kind of weather that those moments of transition, because we all felt like we were working towards that collective goal.
And if I can I jump in, Anne?
I was about to ask you to, so yes.
And I was just going to pick up on something that the thing which really triggered something that I feel is very strongly about, something that Emilia talked about, was really this idea that when we had our new president CEO arrive, you really want, at that time I was senior curator, so I was not a managing director or managing the exhibitions and collections department. But I think what you can do in those moments where there is people are feeling vulnerable, where we know change is coming, and often the area of the institution which feels most vulnerable is curatorial, with a director coming in, because if they want to reshape a program or they don't like what they've seen in the last decade, it's often the curators who are at the forefront of that discussion. And we have 3 curators on staff, and then we have another 5 who are responsible for exhibition coordination, collections management, preparation, and the prep team. And what that moment between directors gives you is the opportunity to really come together, to really speak freely with one another, to talk about how you as an organization, as a department, can work together, can be seen as a strong and positive force within the organization. Because when people are feeling vulnerable, there's a lot of negativity that can happen, there's a lot of rumors that start circulating, and to really be on top of that and to remain a very sort of not above the fray, but making sure that you are modeling behavior for everyone, so that we don't know what's going to happen. There's no point in going down that road. Let's talk about what we believe are the strengths of this institution, what makes us unique, what we have to offer, so that when the new leader does come in, we are a force to be reckoned with in a positive way, that we're willing to be flexible, we're willing to change. We have institutional memory, and that is so valuable. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to, be open to new ideas and directions. And I think you can really empower your organization or your department to work together, because we're larger than both Emilia's and Anne's institutions are. We have a staff of about full-time about 28 to 30. But we're still lean in terms of it's all about sort of the quota between people and what you're producing, and all not-for-profits are lean. So the good thing is that everyone in the department has their own job, and they are fully responsible for that job. So to empower those people to make decisions, to come to the table, to take ownership of their area is of utmost importance in terms of motivating people and keeping them and feeling, as Emilia said, that they have a say in this, that it's not a top-down, making sure that you communicate. We have directorial meetings, that is the management team, weekly, making sure that the appropriate information is then translated down to your department, and that they're aware of any strategic decisions that are being made. We've just finished a strategic plan as well, and involving them in that process, as Emilia said. Although Emilia sounds like she did a better job of including people within her organization than I think I did.
Fewer people to include, Toby.
So, Toby, I saw that on was it the website that you were interim director at one point, right?
No, never of the institution?
Okay.
No,
Yes.
never. No. So
Okay. Okay.
began as collections manager. I then became associate curator, collections manager in a joint split position under one director, then became full curator under my third director, and then moved up to a senior position. And then when our present president and CEO arrived, she moved me because our last head of chief curator, director of exhibitions, director of curatorial affairs, there's all kinds of titles. He was an American and he went back to the US, and so I was moved into that position in an acting capacity for one
Okay.
year, and then stated whatever it was, made the position in
Okay.
January of 2016. Yeah.
All right. Congratulations. So I'm going to
Thank
give
you.
you a break, and I'm going to come back to you because you have 3.5 positions. So your title reads. So the question is, Amelia, I'm going to ask you first. How do you deal with overwhelm, and how do you communicate your overwhelm, or trying to balance it all?
Sure. That has, for me, been one of the challenges in taking on this management role. And that's sort of the premise that we started with this webinar, that, how do you manage to keep your own curatorial work going while also serving in this management capacity? And the thing that changed most significantly for me when I moved from associate curator to curator of collections and exhibitions was actually managing people, so having direct reports. And I found that I've had to focus a lot on my time management skills. And, that's this concept that's easy to toss out there. But, what that's really meant for me is to try and toggle between kind of the concerns of the minute, the concerns of the week, the concerns of the month, the concerns of the quarter. And for me personally, it's really the way that I've been able to do it is to try and block time to really channel that type A personality and organize all of my one-to-one meetings or staff meetings on one particular day so that I have time during the week to really prioritize my curatorial tasks, really trying to make a concerted effort, call it once a month, to go out and do some studio visits, see some shows, to do some reading, continue with the research. So it's really just been planning my time, and I found that in trying to plan my time in that more effective way, that's actually sort of trickled down to the way that I manage. So it's informed and that's made it easier for me. So it's informed the way that, that framework has informed the way that I'm working with my kind of direct reports. And it's not to suggest that everything needs to be hyper scheduled or, there's not room for flexibility within that framework, but just I think I found that it's important to communicate expectations to the folks that you're managing directly, and helping them kind of sit at that 30,000-foot level, then 10,000-foot level, and then day-to-day level. I'm kind of, again, modeling that, as you suggested, Toby, in the way that I work to kind of help them work, because it's very easy in a small institution to become overwhelmed. My mentor and I worked through this a lot. I had a lot of questions about this, and she, suggested to me, there may be times when you just need to turn off your email, give yourself a couple hours in the morning, and realize that you're not going to respond to every email that day. It's also been helpful for me in terms of prioritizing tasks and not ending up in a situation where we're so overwhelmed, because there are plenty of worthy things we can pursue at any given time. It's really been going back to the mission and the strategic plan and letting that guide the choices that we make. So being intentional about what we prioritize here. And so an example I can think of is we have a looming deadline for a grant, a Mellon grant that the university gives out, and we, as part of that grant, need to really show student involvement in a meaningful and intentional way. And we have a lot of great ideas about building a class, an exhibition, But we realized that we're not going to be able to build those alliances with the right faculty members in time to submit that grant. So we had to make the decision, we're going to put that on hold and work on it and resubmit for next year. So it's kind of that toggling back and forth between, knowing that that is a really worthwhile project that we should pursue, but realizing that we want to do it right and well, and that sometimes you need to take a step back. So, I mean, the other thing that I really relied on a lot is process. So again, trying to create a structure that is mutually established. So putting together an exhibition timeline together with everybody in the museum so that there's buy-in from everybody and there's accountability from everybody. Working on an exhibition policy with everybody at the museum. And again, I'm at a small institution, so it's easier to do that. But making sure those voices are represented in that process. So, it goes back to that notion of transparency, but also of accountability. And so when you're at a small institution, delegation becomes hard because everybody has so many things to do at any given moment. But when you have those guideposts of the kind of collaboratively developed documents or structures that you've put in place, I think you can avoid some of the conflict that comes with everybody trying to do a lot of things at once, because you can turn to those as guideposts.
Okay. So to our mentees who are online, if you have any questions, you can please type it in and it'll appear in the question box. All right? So Tobi, how do you manage overwhelm?
Everything that Emilia said, I try and practice. One of the things that I find very effective, and I would stress that at least works for me, is I have clear days and I have meeting days. And I try never to have just one meeting in a day, because you're preparing for it, or you end up answering a few emails, and then you just can't get into the groove of research or reading or whatever it is that you need to be doing. So ideally, Mondays and Fridays are days with no meetings. And then we always have management meetings. There's certain standing meetings, and so I try and block everything else on that day if I can. And that really helps me have more productive days during the week. I think for us, I mean, the most recent example I can give is we've just finished the strategic plan. And because I was so involved in its preparation and thinking and working with our department, we now have a really clear direction. And the point that Emilia made about sort of 10,000 feet or 30,000 feet, how many feet, however high up you are, when I talk with the staff about what their priorities are for that month, we can always go back to what the institutional priorities are. And I have to say, it has clarified and sort of streamlined everything, because now we're actually building our goals for next year. And they all feed into those same three priorities. So if it doesn't serve those priorities, I mean, of course, rights and reproductions, our collections manager is going to get a lot of those requests, and we have our, there's the business as usual. But then when that's done, it's very clear where we should be spending our time. So again, like Emilia, I try and sort of keep, when I'm structuring my time, I'm thinking about the same, I'm trying to think about that for the staff as well, and trying to keep them on track so that they meet their goals. And those goals feed into the institutional goals. Someone once gave me a tip, and I have to say, it's really kind of great. It was very basic, but it really works. So they said, look at your calendar for the next week. Think about what you have to do. And for Monday to Friday, write down totally achievable tasks, even if it's an email. So on Monday, say you want to make sure that you send this email off, finish this report, and make a phone call that you've been avoiding making. On Tuesday, do the same thing. Then look at the week and say, okay, if I, and the first time I did it, I looked at the week, I thought, wow, if I can do all that next week, I'll feel really good about it. And it's kind of fun, because if you get through all the things on the one day, you can steal something from the next day and get a jump start on it. But just knowing what you're trying, because we have our email boxes alone I could spend all day on my email box just responding to emails, and then I will not get through any of the. It's like that. We're in many ways it's a curse. It's great that we're accessible, but anybody can fire you an email, and your response is hours in the making if it's a research question or so. It's really just kind of planning out a couple of weeks, and if you know, okay, I'm going to get these 3 things done and other things, but I know that's what I have to get done today. It's a really measurable. It's a really measurable goal. And I have to say, like when someone told me, I thought, oh, that sounds kind of, she said, just try it. And so I have to say I'm out of the habit of doing it, but I often come back to it when I'm feeling just like there's too much. I have to just shut the door and make a master list of what needs to be done, and then start parsing that out. And as soon as I do that, I feel better, because it's never as much as you think it is. You know, I mean, it's always a lot, but once you start prioritizing and realizing, oh, that can wait, this is what I'm doing. By the end of this month, this is going to be completed. And like Emilia, we also had a grant deadline, which we were all working towards, but we had a unforeseen large number of acquisitions this year and large collections. So our collections manager, who was meant to lead this grant, was finding that she just couldn't get ahead because she was processing so many of these donations. And again, that's something that we had put in place as a goal for this year, but given what happened, we had to remain flexible, and it was unrealistic to expect her to be able to do all of that. And so our president and CEO really understood those pressures and pulled back and said, you know what, we're not going to do it this year. We'll do it next year. And just like Emilia, it's really important. We know we need to do it, but we want to be able to do it well. So not forcing, you know, when you think about the quality of your own work and the circumstances under which you want to be able to produce your best work, you have to be able to do that for the staff as well. You have to be able to give them the same opportunities to succeed and not put them in a situation whereby they can't do their best work in a grant application or something. So I guess in a nutshell, it really is just trying to think as much in advance as you can, and then really trying to pace everything and helping your staff do the same. And sometimes you just have to say, there's too much, we can't do it. And that's not failure. I think that's smart management.
Okay. It's interesting because we all have this shared experience with us, it's almost 2 grants we can't complete because of, you know, the museum is under academic affairs, but we're also, you know, have to get the approval of the provost for like course releases, and so we really don't have experience with that yet. But it'd be great to push a program forward. So I guess the question is, you know, we're a staff of 4. We do amazing things. We're overwhelmed. We're tired. We love the institution, and we're celebrating 20 years. I first started as a student assistant when the museum opened 20 years ago. I graduated from Spelman 20 years ago, and we believe in the mission wholeheartedly, but how do you manage ambition? How do you know when to say no? And just how do you manage ambition? Because it seems in this society, increasing emails, increasing instant messages, increasing text messages, you know, how do you manage it all? It just seems like we're being called to do more and more and more.
I think that I was just reading, I actually pinned it up here, this article, Metrics of Success in Art Museums, Axel Anderson article. And I think it just, I guess for me, the answer to that question comes back to how are you going to measure your success? So ambition for its own sake, you know, to be bigger, to serve more people, to increase the staff, to do more programming, doesn't necessarily always, you know, warrant the effort. So I think it's really taking the time to understand how are you measuring success, what's your mission, and what can you do to create the highest impact or the greatest impact within your parameters. But I think it's something, so it's really kind of taking that time to work through those questions first. And when you have a really strong sense of that, I think it becomes easier to manage your own ambition because it kind of your way forward becomes clear, or you know, how you're going to advance your mission, it becomes clear in ways. But I mean, it's something that we we struggle with as well, particularly when you're trying to manage kind of in reach. So this is maybe something uniquely experienced by academic art museums, but how are you working with faculty? How are you working with students? How are you working with other officers at the university? In reach and outreach. So serving as both a resource for the community and for the campus community and the community at large. And I think that's where a lot of I found for an academic art museum where we run into challenges. And so sometimes it's just prioritizing within those audiences. But yeah, I don't know that I have the complete answer, but that's how I'm working towards it. You know, try to understand what success for your museum is, and then that will somehow dictate the terms of what your ambition should be.
Yeah, I would echo that and say, you know, hopefully most institutions, if you don't have a strategic plan, you want to be making one for precisely this reason, because what it does is it serves to channel all of the ambitions so that everybody is working together towards trying to achieve whatever those goals are that you as an institution are trying to realize. And ambition is you know, when I think about ambition, I do think about institutional ambition. So, you know, we have our curatorial projects that we work on individually on behalf of the institution, and some of those are more ambitious than others. But when you work collaboratively and you bring on as many people to work with you, then that really motivates everyone to sort of, and it's easier because then you're all doing it together. So it is a shared ambition, and where you can find those points and be able to work with as many people as possible, not just even in your department, but across the institution, it really, it goes a long way.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a question from one of the mentees, and it is as follows. Did any of you read specific management or leadership books that you found particularly helpful?
I have not read books necessarily, but I was fortunate enough to attend a College Art Association panel presented by the Getty Leadership Institute, and it was called, I think, the Smart Museum Director. I can look it up and send it around if that mentee wants to contact me afterwards.
Sure.
And I found like it was incredibly helpful, again, in helping me understand how you can be a leader within your institution without necessarily occupying the highest level of leadership, and really taking those principles about how to build strong working relationships regardless of your particular role. I found that to be very helpful. But, and I would just encourage the mentee to look at other resources within the AAMC. For me, AAMG has been incredibly helpful, AAM as well. The great thing about our field is that it is very collaborative. People will share information and share, I think, best practices. I've also relied on kind of networks, my own networks, and when you cultivate different relationships with people, they generally, you never know when those relationships are going to, I don't want to say pay off, but you never know when you're going to need to rely on a perspective from somebody you developed a relationship with in a different capacity, and so I would say just making sure that you kind of leverage those networks to pull that knowledge when you need it. But I don't have any management books per se, but I would look at Getty Leadership Institute has that program. There's AAMG has a similar program called the Leadership Summit or something like that they do in collaboration with the Kellogg School of Management. But I'm sure there are plenty of books out there.
Okay. Any references, Tobi, that you would like to?
No, not specifically. I tend to, what fascinates me, actually, I like reading articles about human dynamics. So I'm really more interested, not more, but I'm very interested in trying to figure out how to work with different kinds of personalities, because I think for me that's at the core of one's ability to really understand and motivate. Because everybody is so incredibly different. So I tend to sort of read, and I'm sorry, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but generally those are the articles that I'm drawn to and there's so many of them online, and they pop up in your Facebook feeds, and sometimes it's easy to say they're very commonsensical, but at the same time, sometimes there'll be a moment where you read something and you'll it's like that eureka moment. It's like, yes, it's so obvious, but I hadn't thought of that, and that's a really good way to approach an individual about an issue that you need to discuss, or because I think more than anything, what I've realized over the decades now that I've been here is effective communication and being able to really understand what someone's saying in whatever manner they are trying to say it, and to try and move whatever discussion forward is at the bedrock of sort of working together collaboratively. And there are such a range of personalities that you need, as in a management position, you need to be able to recognize those, to be respectful of those, but also to be able to keep things going in the right direction. So those tend to be, as opposed to management per se, those tend to be the articles that I'm drawn to, because I just want to be able to be as effective a communicator and understanding of it's not also, I'm saying the people that my reports, but also being able to effectively work across the management field, because we're a management team of 6 plus our president CEO, and so there's myself and our director of education and programs, and then we have marketing communications, we have building facilities, we have HR management, and we have fundraising. So and all of us have our own agendas at the table. We're all not fighting, but we're all representing, and we're all trying. Well, sometimes we fight. But in a good way, not in a bad way. But we all, what I'm hoping to see happen with collections and exhibitions may be at odds with what our development department is trying to do, or something happening with the building. So again, recognizing the personalities at the table, and how you can effectively try and get through a lot of stuff to get somewhere else, because we can get so bogged down with you can just go in circles and circles and circles, and we're all different personality types. So yeah,
it's funny. I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you should also lean on your mentors, because there are ways that they likely have experienced all manner of challenges or opportunities in the workplace, and that was really a tremendous asset for me, to be able to have candid conversations with my mentor about how she has and had managed different people, different situations, different relationships, to kind of talk through those case studies. And really, I would say, making sure that you can sort of parse what they're doing that you find successful and make it adaptable to your particular situation. So kind of have those takeaways, but make sure that you, because it's not one size fits all. It's sort of to what you were speaking to, Toby, that, there's so many different personalities and ways of working, that if you can identify the kind of the key, the key ways that your mentor is working through some of these, you can likely pick up some tips there.
Cool. We have a little over 10 minutes. We're just at 10 minutes to finish our conversation. I'm going to encourage the mentees to submit any additional questions you have. But the next question is, I manage a staff of 5, and I'm struggling with trying to figure out when to let things go and when to truly engage a staff member regarding a particular negative incident. I don't want to get bogged down in being a micromanager, but I also don't want to appear out of touch or unconcerned. So, When do you let things go? And when do you engage, or how do you engage?
Do you want me to go first, Emilia?
Sure.
Um, I think you have to, with every situation, you have to think about the ramifications of acting or not acting. So, because there's a fine line, you don't want to be perceived as not taking not sort of dealing with the situation. If it's affecting, you manage 5 people, you said. I'm assuming is that the entire. I don't know if it's if it's a department, or is the lack of action, let's call it that, on the behalf of on the part of one of the staff members, is it impacting the entire department or the entire organization? If so, I think you have to act. One of the things I was thinking about when I was thinking about the conversation we were going to be having, was when I first started managing people, and I had staff coming to me asking me questions. So they were new to the position, or they were, it was a position that I had done before, and they would come and ask questions. And but at the same time, I want them to learn how to answer their own questions. And so I know that sounds like I'm going off topic here, but my point is that the thing I came up with, and I just kind of came up with it, was if the ramifications of a bad decision, think about what the ramifications of a bad decision are. So does it just impact you, and you would have to fix it? Does it impact the department, and it will impact other people and their work, like the work that they're doing? Does it impact the institution? Could we be sued by a bad decision? So if it's the first, try making the decision yourself, because you will be the only one who suffers if you make a bad decision. You're going to have to fix the work, or you're going to have to do more, whatever. If it's the department, run it by me, but I want you to propose what. So rather than answering the question, what would you do in this case? And if it's the institution, definitely run it by me. But I think with where you're having conflict, I think a similar maybe parameter might make sense, in that think about how is it really negatively impacting the rest of the organization or the department? And then I think if it is, I think you do have to step in and have an open conversation about, what the issue is and how it might be improved, or how you can. I always start by saying, there appears to be an issue. What can I do? How can I assist in making this run more smoothly, or as opposed to saying, you've done something wrong, or, again, it's, and I think that that's a really important strategy, is, or saying, again, without knowing what it is, it's hard to sort of come up with a strategy, but allowing them also the opportunity of how can they solve the problem, and how can you, as their manager, help them solve that problem? Like, what do you need from me to be able to make this better? I don't know.
I think that's great advice, Toby. I think the other question is it an isolated incident, or is it a pattern? So
yes.
Determining that, because I think that often particularly if it's involving staff dynamics with other staff members, it can be perceived as a kind of he said, she said, or she said, she said, so are you discussing a larger issue, pattern of behavior that seems to be concerning, or is it an isolated incident? And just, if you are having the conversation with the person, ensuring that you can frame it that way for them. This is, I understand that this has been an ongoing issue. Here are some examples, without being accusatory, but, and again, how am I going to, as a manager, enable you to succeed?
One of the things that I found, and I find this fascinating, is that I can be sitting in a room, we can be sitting in a staff meeting with 30 people, someone will say something, and you come out of that room and you ask 3 different people and they've heard 3 very different things. I find that fascinating. And so often, and I say this all the time, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. So this point that Emilia just made about, he said, she said, the best thing to do in those instances, and it's the most difficult thing to do, is you just have everybody sit together in a room and talk. And it can be extremely uncomfortable, but then nobody can say he said, because he's sitting right there. And you can just have an open conversation about whatever the issue is. And it's, as I say, it's uncomfortable, but I've done it a couple of times, and it really, really does work because everybody has to take responsibility for what they've said or what they've done because they're in a group sitting in a room with 2 or 3 other people, and it really is just how people filter information. And really, it'll be like A to Z in terms of what people heard. The director will say something, it'll come out and they'll say, everyone's being laid off, and someone will say, no, that's not what I heard. So,
it's not what you say, it's what people hear.
Yes, exactly.
I think the other, what I would add, Toby, is that knowing when to convene that group is another kind of delicate matter, and you have to kind of assess the personalities at play, but often that kind of early intervention can stop the kind of snowball effect of maybe negative behaviors, building resentments, building who knows what, because again we don't know the particular situation, but convening the group or the particular players at maybe not immediately after, because if it's a difficult situation and people are emotionally invested or feel vulnerable in any particular way, it might not be great to engage them immediately, but kind of taking stock of that, trying to intervene prior to the situation really getting magnified, I guess.
And I would also say, I keep talking about sort of bringing several people in the room, but you never ever want to be in a position where you are in any way compromising the dignity of the staff member. So if there are conversations that have to be had just with the two of you, I mean, I think that's where you obviously want to start, but never calling out anybody in front of their colleagues, because that's to be humiliated, quite often, I shouldn't say quite often, but, that it'll completely backfire. And you have to make sure that the respect and dignity of that employee is maintained at all costs.
Okay. So we have maybe 3 more minutes, and I am going to just ask you maybe a simple question. And I guess that is, how do you build morale within yourself and with others? And so how important is that to achieving the shared vision and the shared strategic plan? How do you build morale? And is morale important? I think it is, but how do you build morale?
I think it's definitely important. It's paramount. You want people to be able to rally around whatever the mission is, or to be able to support you to be able to want to work for you in a lot of ways. So I think that thinking about it in that way, it's creating, we talked about kind of the different tiers of mentorship, and we've all been mentored along the way, and kind of paying it forward and making sure that you continue to mentor people. So in my experience, it's really sitting down with, if there are people at a more junior level or people who are reporting to me, and understanding what their aspirations are, understanding what their strengths are, understanding where, they see their career trajectory going, and really making a concerted effort to give them opportunities, kind of stretch opportunities to maybe pursue that in a way that gives them, the space to explore that area. So, one example I can think of is we had a registrarial assistant who was really interested in curatorial work. And I guess the positive thing about being in working with a small staff is there's always more work to be done. And so it really allowed me to give her an opportunity to kind of stretch in that curatorial direction in support of a show that we were working on. Now, granted, the stakes were not, as high as they may be in a larger institution, but I think just fundamentally understanding what what motivates people on a personal level, and then to kind of create that space and those opportunities for them to pursue that, really goes a long way towards establishing trust and creating buy-in. And I would go back to just, again, that idea of finding common ground, celebrating accomplishments of other people, I mean, that's a big morale booster, because when I think you all can realize that your efforts are complementary, it isn't about curatorial versus education, or marketing versus development, that really everybody's meant to be working in concert, and you show, it's like show, don't tell, how you can work together to achieve common goals. I think that goes a long way toward kind of, you have to make an argument to bring people along with you. It can't be, I think that Getty leadership presentation that I referred to it as soft power, or combining soft power and hard power to make smart power. I realize out of context that might not make a ton of sense, but I mean, I think it's really connecting with people as an individual, as and trying to foster that development. It helps create buy-in, and that leads to boosts in morale, I think.
Yeah, I would say, if I had to say it really succinctly, I would say empower them and acknowledge them. So try and find any opportunity to give them control over what they're doing, so that they are decision makers, that they're making smart decisions, that they're moving, for themselves and for the institution, and then making sure constantly to acknowledge success. And one example, the institution just won a major award at the Ontario Association of Art Galleries last week, and it was a project. It was great because it was a contemporary project that I had nothing to do with, and the curator was the design. It was a design and installation award, and we had a team of 7, our prep team plus the crew, and our exhibition coordinators were also involved. And so for the award ceremonies, usually 1 or 2 go up, and I said I want the entire team to go up on stage. And what was really lovely, which is a very, it's kind of a no-brainer in a way, but no other institutions do that. It was the last award of the night, and we filled the stage. But they all went up and filled the stage. And I can't tell you afterwards how many other institutions came up to me and said, that was so fantastic that you had everybody up there on stage being acknowledged, like all the prep team, the design, everybody. So it's and that's a really easy. That was so easy. That was a gift, like that they did the work, but they were able to be acknowledged provincially for their work. So I think people just want to know that you appreciate what they do, and that they are empowered to. I loved Emilia's word, which was stretch. You said stretch something.
Give them stretch opportunities.
Stretch opportunities. I like that. Yeah. And opportunities to grow and not be in a position that doesn't allow them to grow. I think that can really help morale too.
Okay, I think we've reached the end of our time. We'd like to thank our mentees for joining in, and Tobi and Emilia, thank you so much for those words of wisdom and the references you gave. I will look those up and see if I can put them on the site, but I did leave the titles of what you were talking about. And there's a great book about smart power. I would forget who wrote it, but it's used in issues of diplomacy, and culture is also part of that. I'd also like to thank Lucy Layden for helping to manage this effort. This is my first webinar, and I enjoyed it immensely. And also Mary Kay Lambino, who mentored me through this process. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for your time. And as a reminder, the webinar will be up on the resources section of the AAMC website in about a week or so. All right, thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you
all right,
all.
thank you. Be in touch.